What depth psychology allows the person is to have eyes to see. What do I mean by eyes to see? Eyes to see that human beings are not just made of eating, sleeping, moving. I mean, all of the what I call the visible, which are very important because those are basic needs. If you were to pay attention to Maslow and basic needs, but beyond the basic needs, people have a psyche, and the psyche has not only the conscious part but the unconscious part, and the unconscious part which is so vast, which is there, which has the soul, which has the spirit. And if we don't appreciate that man and woman have that human nature in them, then our lives will just be so ordinary. But when you see what is inside and in the depths of yourself and in the others, then you will say, I wonder what moves him. I wonder what colors he like. I wonder what are his night dreams. I wonder what archetypes are alive in him. I wonder what myth uh, is he living his life, or is she living her life. I wonder, um, you know, what poetry is there in his or her soul. I wonder what music he or she likes. So there is so much more appreciation for the world that we are in, or for the people, humanity that we are surrounded with, that we live with. And in doing so, hopefully the external world will not be so driven by more and more and more and more and more, but rather be driven by what is there, a curiosity of connecting, a curiosity of relating, a curiosity of getting to know each other. And maybe in the discovery of connections, of relating, and just communing and having conversations, it becomes a richer world that does not need so much, so much destruction of our planet, because one consumes more and more and more and more as one is hungry inside, when the hunger can be satisfied with deep connections coming from sharing deep stories with one another. The work of Jungian psychology is there. It is a foundation in my practice. But I don't bring it to the fore immediately, because one listens to the client or one listens to the patient. And then after the listening and after the sharing of the person, um, if it is appropriate, I bring it in. If it is not, because sometimes there are issues that are brought to the table, to the counseling session, and so one looks at that directly. However, even as one looks at that directly, there may be a story behind the concern that needs to be looked at in a deeper way. So, for example, if the client brings in guilt or brings in anger, sometimes they say, I have an anger management problem. Yes, okay, fine, you look at that. And maybe sometimes you would ask a psychiatrist to come and provide the appropriate medical intervention. But beyond the anger, one looks at, okay, what is the story? Maybe it has built up through the years. Maybe it has been prompted by years of despair, by years of not being able to express oneself. So that is the deeper story. That is where the Jungian framework comes to fore. Yes, I have seen them appreciate having a framework of looking deeper than what is presented. I call it the invisible, from the visible to the invisible. So they do appreciate it, and so sometimes when they refer, I know how they appreciate it, because when they refer, they say, "Can I ask my boyfriend to have a practice a session with someone like you who has a Jungian framework. So then I know that it's appreciated. About this course, the Kayamanan course, it has always been a dream for decades. The team or the community of CJCC has been uh, doing its, you might say, its work of conceptualizing, of brainstorming, uh, and it has lasted maybe across 4 to 5 years. But it was last year, again, maybe thanks to the pandemic and its context of focused energies, that a team really worked on this design. And it was also a design that had come from experience of CJCC, first doing its Exploring the Self workshops, which is our popular 4-day workshops. So there's this person that I know. Um, his work is very much in creative endeavors, and he has identified himself in terms of the role that he has, in terms of, you might say, his business label. So if his business label was events organizer or events designer, then that is how he prescribed his life around being an events designer. Um, However, one day in a conversation with him, when I said events designer is such a limited uh, prescription of who you are, you have to recognize that the archetype of artist is the one that is alive in you, and that's the one that the artist has many containers to express your creativity. That is when I felt that that particular notion or that particular insight, that the artist lives and animates him, is the one that allowed this person to really, really go beyond defining himself only as an events organizer or an events designer. So the archetype, the deeper story, the one that moves you, is the one that provides life for you. And so once you recognize that, the way it liberates you from labels and structures can just make you flourish like anything. I have also one client who came to me, and her look at herself is really how the world defined her. What I call metrics. Her metrics was really her job, her salary, where she lived, how the external world knew her. And so I said, I think, if I remember the conversation, have you considered looking at yourself from the inside? In other words, what's there inside you? What keeps you going? What keeps you alive? What's the one that fuels you? What's the one that gives you joy inside of you, rather than looking at the external metrics that define you? I said there is a world inside you that makes you beautiful, that makes you joyful, that makes you appreciate who you are. And just that slight shift of looking at herself and looking at a world that is inside you, that is so rich and so deep, that made a difference. I could see it from the way her eyes just glowed when she said, oh, it's like light bulbs. And that was it. I never saw her after that, but I think that was enough for her. That shift of perspective was enough. Yeah, it's not dramatic, again, in the eyes of the world, but it is such an internal change that happened to the person. CJCC wants to pursue its mission of spreading, you might say, Jungian psychology or depth psychology in our country through this particular course. And it is seen as a series of courses. And the hope for dream is that we will have practitioners uh, in the field of change management or in the field of healing, of therapy and counseling, to incorporate depth psychology in their practice. This also means, as well, having leaders who lead with a depth perspective. Why? Why now? I think the pandemic has also brought about a greater mindfulness. One was that it was a pause for 2 years, and while the pause has damaged economies, damaged livelihoods, damaged socializing with one's friends, and there was suffering. Yet I think the pause also helped us discover that which was inside of us, discover our inner strengths, discover our stories. We had more time to make stories with our friends or with our family because we were stayed in in the confines of our homes. But more than that, I think the pandemic also allowed us to appreciate pauses, and in the pauses, made us go deeper inside. And deep stories is a way of us getting to know ourselves in a richer manner, or in the manner of uh, discovering deeper parts and aspects of ourselves that are not ordinarily talked about. And so this course is meant for that. That one has a way of diving in without being afraid, of diving in, knowing that it's all right and it's safe to dive in, and diving in, and at the same time enjoying the process. That's what the certificate course is about. The deep stories is really getting to know yourself in a more, you might say, structured manner, in a more guided manner, with the help of depth psychology. What makes this course different from the Exploring the Self workshop and from our applied Jungian psychology and archetypal studies course is it really focuses on a breadth that we did not take up, as well as on a depth. That's one. Second is we also bring in more stories, the myths in our in this Kayamanan course, and the myths that we explore are myths that we have not explored in either of the two courses. And then the third aspect is we bring in more consciously or mindfully the aspect of bridging who we are into the world at large. So that's the difference. So the movement is from diving into the self, as I said, in a very structured manner, because there are guideposts and structures along the way, and then looking also at myths and different kinds of myths that allow us to say, all right, I recognize my patterns, just like those myth stories reveal really, 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 really what? An extensive process of people, how these characters in this myth go to their depths, and one recognizes and resonates with their stories because it also mirrors one story. So that's the second aspect. And the third aspect is we allow you to be able to see how you can bridge your particular story that you have discovered or rediscovered, and see how it is brought back, bring back the gifts of self into the world. You know, when you are a leader, or when you are a consultant, or when you are a healer, or when you are a therapist or a counselor, it is important to know yourself. We talk about projection, and projection is an everyday occurrence. And unless you know who you are, you'll project your attitudes, you'll project your biases, you'll project your prejudices, you'll project your notions of the world with the people that you lead, with the clients that you help, with the people who are seeking assistance from you, and it is not fair. Why is it not fair? Because you have power. You have power. You have power of influence because of the position and the role that you are in. A power as leader, a power as practitioner, a power as healer and therapist. And somehow, the practice of depth psychology is really making the person discover who he is or who she is. And if you, yes, your influence is important, yes, but if you don't recognize that that is your influence, and your influence overpowers your client or overpowers your group, unless you consciously say that, yes, it is important that my group adopt this particular set of values that I have, especially if you're the owner or leader of your team. But one still comes from a place of mindfulness. Because remember, there is a, I like this phrase that I have learned in psychology when I was starting, the tyranny of the shoulds. And do not add to the tyranny of the shoulds. Uh, One of the processes in Jungian psychology that we really promote is the concept of individuation. And the concept of individuation really is to honor the individual, and to see how he or she can be more of who he or she is. And that's the role that we play as leaders, as practitioners. Now, as I said, granted that leaders have a particular direction of the organizations that they lead, but it does not mean direction that will suppress others, but maybe it's a direction that will inspire others so that they could be more of themselves, and in so doing find alignment with what you wish to do. As I said earlier, the need for people to be more soul aware is because you want to shift the energies to looking at the internal world, because so much of humanity now is focused on the external world. And so we want to shift it a little bit into focusing on the richness of the world inside of you, because is that is your resource. That is who you are. That is what makes you great. That's what makes you, intensely you. And when you discover that, that is such a liberating, profound experience that you just want to go and share it with the world. So, and live it, not only share it, but live it in the world. This Kayamanan course allows you to discover deep stories of self from the structure or discipline of depth and Jungian psychology. And at the end of this course, or during the duration of this course, you can't help but be excited about sharing the discoveries and sharing this with your friends, your colleagues, or with loved ones. And in the sharing of your loved ones, hopefully that you will discover more about yourself, and they themselves will be awakened by the stories that you share with them. Because when you discover something that is so delightful, isn't it part of human nature to say, oh, I learned this? And then you make cuento and you make conversations. So hopefully, apart from the knowledge that you will get, and this enriches you and this enriches your craft or your career, that it will also enrich your conversations with your loved ones and your friends. So uh, I enjoin you to come and please sign up and be with us in our Kayamanan certificate course, Deep Stories of Self. Thank you.